Which is interesting. Is it the bookmark that we just finished, that we're finishing here, is that halfway through?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And what's crazy is this year, we started at the beginning of the year. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we've done
a lot.
As much as we did all of last year. Although we only started in, February? So we missed like the first month?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the bookmarks.
So it wasn't much. But we're 50% of the way through.
Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. And last year we were just through the New Testament with some Psalms sprinkled in. But yeah, now we've gone back. It's a different kind of reading.
And it actually feels like we're halfway through the story, like where we are with the kingdom and what's happening. It's like
halfway through the story. We got a ways to go.
Yeah.
Excuse me. All right, so here we are, the end of 2 Samuel. This is kind of the end of David's
it's like a book into
time with us.
To David.
There was definitely some interesting things here right off the bat that, and maybe I didn't realize fully because there's some down in the cheat notes and the cross references with First Chronicles.
Yep.
So there's like these like ties here. I didn't know.
Yeah, First and Second Chronicles is a retelling of everything from 1 Samuel through 2 Kings.
Okay.
It's like another version of it all.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because this immediately, it started in 2 Samuel 24, verse 1. Again, again, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, go number Israel and Judah. And that made me start thinking back into Judges when it's like, the anger of the Lord. But then if you go read in Chronicles, it says Satan, not the Lord. And it's like, well, wait a second.
Yeah.
Which is it?
Right.
Is it both? And then thinking back to Judges, because it's that same kind of language making you think, wait, is this God or is this Satan doing it? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
The evil spirit with Saul, like which one? Like, who, or is it David?
Well, but specifically,
who is it?
Specifically in like that language being used, the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, dang.
As I even wrote in my notes, it's like the cycle of Judges.
Yeah.
It already starts in 1 Kings again. When we get in there, it's like it just repeats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually even thinking about that throughout like this whole story. We talk about the cycles in Judges, but it's really patterns from Genesis 1 through 3 on. I mean, it's really patterns over and over and over again, and you see it sort of like distilled down in Judges, and you're going to see it in Kings too, but it's just the same pattern over and over. Yeah. It's just way worse when it's the king or the leader.
So ultimately, for whatever reason, David's like, oh man, we got to count. All we got to do is census. We got to count all these men.
Yeah.
And he has some wise counsel who's like, dude, I don't know. I don't think this is a good idea, but he ignores it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's supposed to be dependent. Again, remember, like one of our big concepts here is that the king is supposed to be dependent on Yahweh for his military might, for his rule, and counting his military troops or counting his people. He's saying, how many people do I have?
Yeah.
Instead of just trusting that Yahweh's promises he's faithful to, that he's going to give him descendants that, are more than the stars in the sky, and also that he's going to be the one to bring victory. There's a reason why all the victories were by a small number of Israelites, because it's Yahweh. So this is like exposing David's ambition and pride and lack of faith in this moment. But then you see him repent. So it's a very it's a conclusion to who David sort of is. Like he has these moments whenever he's prideful and he exalts himself, and then he's humbled, right? It's just like Hannah's song. But then he always repents, and you see that at the end of the story.
Yeah, I mean, we clearly see that David's heart was struck. David's heart struck him after he had numbered the people. It was like immediately after. He's like, "Oh my God, what did I do?" And then he has that kind of prayer in what is that, 17? Behold, I have sinned. He repents. Behold, I have sinned. I've done wickedly. But these sheep, what have they done? Mm-hmm. Please let your hand be against me and against my father's house. So he's definitely like interceding.
David. He's the shepherd again too. Yeah. It's like the bookend. Like he's the shepherd who cares for his flock, who's willing to take on. Because the Yahweh's anger was kindled against all of Israel. So it's also the sin of all of his people who are being unfaithful. We don't really know exactly what it is, but we can guess because we've read the pattern enough times. but David's willing to take the wrath upon himself. So it's this, okay, this is why he's the ideal king. Because we're going to see with Solomon, you have this ideal kingdom, but this is it. This is why. It's not because of his greatness and his power. It's because he is the shepherd who is humble and who, even though he fails, he's repentant and seeks after God.
Yeah. So we're teaching through the book of Judges for the summer, and we're all kind of in the middle of that. But then last night at my small group, with the men, we were talking about David and his sin with Bathsheba, and having her husband killed and all that. And then we read Psalm 51 and just worked through all right, what is the takeaway for us in the life of David? And it's certainly we will fail again and again. That is the cycle of humanity. But the example of David is repentance, like you're saying. It is having the heart that recognizes, or when someone points out your brokenness and saying, Lord, clean me. Lord, make me right. I need you, because it can't be up to me. So David is a good example in that, even though he fails in many ways.
And that's why he's the ideal king. He repents, he trusts in Yahweh, and he cares about his people. He recognizes when he's trying to exalt himself at the expense of others, because that's another key throughout the story is your sin affects others. Whenever you don't worship and trust Yahweh, that spills over and harms other people always.
Yeah. So I have this come back to that moment after, and I know we're going to get into Kings in a second, but here at the end in 18, where David builds the altar. So he basically goes up to this place. So there's a higher place in the area, and this is the threshing floor. And so I immediately start thinking threshing floor, we've seen those. So and this is ultimately the place where Solomon goes to build, correct?
Yeah.
It just made me wonder, is there some connection or there seems to be something interesting about threshing floors and either the temple or threshing floors as a location, because you think back to Boaz, this kinsman redeemer who is, that's where, that played a key role there. And then a couple other times in what we've read.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Sacred spaces.
Yeah, sacred space. But when we're going to get into 1 Kings, and what we see is in Jerusalem, where Solomon builds the temple, is on the threshing floor. That is the same place where Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac way back in Genesis.
Yeah.
So, he goes a 3 days journey, tells his servants to travel with him. You stay here. The boy and I are going to go up on the mountain and sacrifice to Yahweh. It was that place.
Yeah, see, that's crazy.
Place.
Yeah.
All these ties to Jesus ultimately.
Oh, absolutely.
The greater sacrifice.
Yeah.
The shepherd. Who's willing to sacrifice himself.
Yeah.
It's all right here in 24, yeah.
And so this week, because of all the things happening in the Middle East with Iran and Israel and all that, it's some of what's happening is all connected back to Abraham, really, because you have three faiths that come out of the line of Abraham, and that place is important. And that's part of, what all that is happening. In fact, I was going to use this later.
We're so excited. Seriously.
All right, so this is the guide to the temple. I had one like this for the tabernacle back in Exodus. But this actually goes through the temple that Solomon built, and then it's later destroyed. It's rebuilt as a second temple, and then again expanded in the time of Jesus under Herod's reign. But what I appreciate, right at the very beginning, there's this fold out that shows you. This is awesome.
I hope the cameras, if you're watching online, can see this.
Sorry, probably. But it shows the rock of sacrifice, which is where Abraham and Isaac were, is right inside the most holy place of the temple. That's where it was positioned. And so the Ark of the Covenant, we'll read about all that, is placed there. And later, the other temple is built. But it shows even today.
I'll say, you think it's still there today?
It is there. So you can Google the Dome of the Rock, which is I think the third most holy place in Islam. And you can see there's a picture online from inside, up above, looking down. And scholars have noted that it's not just this rock you can still see, but there's a place that looks as if it's been chiseled out or carved out for the ark to have sat in. So a lot of biblical scholars have tried to deduce, and they think they could see where it actually sat.
Wow.
And so you can see today that
amazing.
same temple grounds from...
Have you've been there? You saw it?
No, because you have to be above, and that is
Yeah.
that's Islamic territory.
Oh.
Which is, whenever you're there, where the temple is, where the Dome of the Rock is, I mean, it's very apparent why there's so much, crisis there, because they're sacred places for all three religions that they're all sharing. It's really sad.
So today, the temple area looks like this. The Islamic Dome of the Rock is built over the place where the most holy place of the temple was.
I mean, think about
now,
that.
but-
The Islamic Dome of the Rock is built over the most holy place in Jewish history.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah.
But it's there. It
Yeah.
really is amazing. It's there.
All right, we got to get out of Second Samuel.
But I will just say, I love, just as far as like reading the story and being halfway done, I love that you're seeing all these hyperlinks.
Yeah.
Because we're going to see more whenever we get into Kings, and you're right. Like, you're supposed to be thinking, oh, a threshing place is somewhere sacred. Oh, a sacrifice. So what does that mean about the temple and God's presence? And these are all, sending us to who Jesus is going to be. So you're seeing all of it and commenting on all of it, and it's all there.
I mean, heck, even the whole I'm going to give you a choice of what's going to happen with all the. Is that what comes up? When does that happen with the pestilence? That's in.
Oh yeah, that's in 24. Yeah,
that's in 24. Yeah, so
yeah, we didn't even talk about that.
Weird coming out of Egypt, and then this angel coming hey, we got to stop the devil. How do we do that? And there's this intercession. I mean,
it's intercession. He says, "I'll take it.
Yeah.
I will take it.
Yeah.
It's my sin." So it's different because he's guilty, but he says, "I will take it upon myself." And then Yahweh says, "Okay, we're done." I mean, that is pretty amazing.
I was like, why is there just one chapter? Why didn't we include it in the last one? I'm glad we didn't. There's a lot here.
Yeah.
Somebody knew what they were doing. I'm just kidding. All right. So we finished 2 Samuel.
Yeah.
Start a new bookmark.
Start a new bookmark and a new book.
New book, but same story. We go right. It's a continuation of the same story.
Yeah, so you're starting a bookmark. We're halfway through, but we're not going to get to the New Testament until September. So I think we talked about this maybe in the last podcast or the one before. It is hard in the summer to keep pushing through this. It's totally worth it. If you can hang on, capture the story in your imagination, because when we get to the Gospel of Matthew in September, new things will come alive because of the journey you've been on reading all this. So stick with it. Okay, First Kings.
Yeah.
I have found that this is what I did this week preparing as I've read. I watched the Bible Project video there's one video for First and Second Kings because it's really one volume really. And then the ESV Study Bible, which you've got, and I have a copy of here, in the very beginning just gives you an understanding of when this was written. So after all these events, it's attributed to Jeremiah. So they're not certain, but there's some connection to the prophet Jeremiah. And what the author has done, whether it was Jeremiah or someone else, is connect this story to the book of Deuteronomy. So there's all of this language from the book of Deuteronomy. Even at the beginning, when David is commissioning Solomon and saying, he's repeating things from Deuteronomy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so it's helpful that we read part of that story. We didn't read Deuteronomy in our reading plan, but the story of Israel is still connected and on repeat here.
And what is but Deuteronomy? We talked about what it is, which is it's the second telling of the law.
Yeah.
It's Moses reminding the people.
Yep.
This is what your covenant is. This is who you are as God's people. This is what it means to live under his rule and reign and experience his blessing.
Yep.
So you can see why that's what this is about.
Yeah. And First and Second Kings gets confusing. Again, I watched the video. I'm reading all this other stuff because even though I've read it before, it takes my mind some time to sort out all the things that start happening when the kingdom divides and you have all of these kings. And at some point, we're talking about Judah, where Jerusalem is. At some point, we're talking about the rest of the tribes. It can be challenging to keep your mind wrapped around it. So lean on those resources.
The maps.
The maps.
The maps and
the videos.
in a timeline of just of the kings, because it's so many names that are even hard to pronounce for us. But it's a timeline of 2 sets of kings. That's what we're going to work through. So if you can We should send a timeline
in
out.
the ESV study Bible, there is a 2-page chart that lists out all the kings.
Okay.
On one page, the kings of Judah, and the other page, the kings of Israel. I got to find it. I think that's next
Which we'll
week.
talk through
Yeah,
what
yeah.
that means,
We'll talk
but it is helpful to just look at that.
Yeah.
And reference that. So you're like, oh, here's where I am in the timeline.
Yep.
Okay, so First Kings.
First Kings. David is old,
Yeah.
about to die.
New concubine.
Yep.
It matters.
that's what I want.
It matters for later.
Yeah.
Because it will matter in the story of who reigns next.
It even matters. It's interesting. I mean, I'm just thinking like,
New concubine.
not new concubine. At first, when I read it, I was like, okay, maybe that. Please tell me that's not what that means. But then it seems as though that is the case.
Well, it says that he knew her not, which means he didn't have sexual relations with her. So he didn't.
Is that
but
really what that means?
Yeah.
Okay.
But she is a concubine. That is what she was. But he's old. He's in bed.
But then when Bathsheba and Nathan come in, that's who's there, like tending to him. And so, like, I'm just thinking, like in that picture, like for her seeing that, that's got to feel like. But maybe in that time, culturally, you're used to the many other wives, and it is what
I think it was culturally expected, but I'm sure I can't imagine she still wouldn't feel sad about the fact that there were other wives and concubines that David had, because he did.
Yeah. She's just a younger, newer model.
Right.
And
To comfort him in his old age. I mean,
Right.
that's what that is.
Yeah.
Keep him warm, keep him comfortable.
Yeah. Oy.
likely she didn't have a choice in the matter. She was told.
Absolutely. I mean, she's his. I mean, which is why later you see one of his sons wants her, because it's a way to seize power.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So Adonijah decides, I'm going to be the king. And he starts. He has
And
this big
Adonijah
feast.
is one of his sons.
Correct.
Yep.
He's the second son after the first son who had already rebelled against David and was killed.
Yeah. So he starts acting like the king, having a big court, throws this big party, and establishes his.
Yeah, he just
his
claims,
position.
which
Yeah.
is, I mean, we're going to read through this, but I mean, again, he was the next son in
Yeah.
line, and a couple of David's, people say, yeah, we'll support you, but it's not who Yahweh has chosen, because that's usually not who he chooses.
What's interesting in this story was that, and maybe I didn't catch it as it first happened because you don't see it till the end, when they hear after he anoints Solomon king, they're like outside the city. So it's almost like they're doing this not in the, they're doing it apart from everything else, not the way it should be.
Yeah, I mean,
That's kinda
David's
how it
still
reads.
alive.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know why they go out the city, but they're close enough they can hear the noise in the city when Solomon is anointed. And they're wondering, what the heck is that? Somebody comes in with news.
Yeah.
I appreciate that David does the right thing here, that he listens to his wife, he listens to the prophet from God, and he anoints a new king when he's still alive.
Do you think there's any significance that Nathan didn't go right to David again and do this? Why he utilized, because there's almost, I don't want to say some deception or manipulation, but it definitely feels like
Some scheming.
That's not how
strategery.
it normally went when it's like the things of a prophet speaking to a king and that kind of
And he's not
accountable-
speaking on behalf of Yahweh. He's like, let's remind him of what Yahweh's already said, and let's tell him what's happening, and you go first, because he's going to see you and remember his son.
He's going to see you and be like, oh man, I'm with this young, hot newer version. Now I'm going to feel bad. Oh yeah, of course, I'll give you what you want.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all real. It's all personal.
This
I
probably
think-
isn't good. I shouldn't be doing this. What do you want?
Yeah. It is good to remember that these aren't just abstract cold stories. Like he was going to see his wife and the son who he promised who was going to be king, who Yahweh says is going to be king, and he needs to protect them.
Yeah.
Because like Nathan said, we talked about this with David's table. There are rivals. And so if this other guy does become king, then Solomon and Bathsheba are probably going to die.
Yeah.
That's just the way it worked back then, because they're rivals.
There's also an element of, I think you alluded to it a moment ago, but David is still the king.
Yeah.
And so to do this means he's laying down his power, even though he's old and stuck in bed. Sometimes
And he's doing it to protect them.
That's right. Sometimes none of this happens. the king dies, and then
They got to figure it out.
they got to figure it out.
Game of Thrones.
That's right. So David to lay down his power at the end of his life and give it to Solomon, I think is notable.
It is.
Nobody wants to go to probate. That's why I got to have a will, get it all lined up.
And he does it because Yahweh had chosen Solomon. We already saw that Yahweh loves Solomon, which means that's the one he's chosen to be the king. And so he's being faithful to Yahweh, and he's protecting his wife and son.
Yeah. So another interesting thing I mentioned to Lance for in verse 35, I have appointed him to be ruler over Israel and over Judah. So what's weird is I'm like, I didn't think it's already divided. And so that he's saying like, hey, you're over these two, it implies that there's already been some kind of separation. I didn't think that, that hadn't happened yet.
That will happen, but also remember they are 12 tribes, and the Levites don't have an inheritance in the land. They're spread out because they're the ones that lead worship to Yahweh for all the tribes. But Judah is the home of Jerusalem, or Jerusalem is the home of Judah. And I think that it points that out because there could be other clan or family leaders that are like, nope, Zebulun, we're going to do our own thing now.
Yeah.
And no, this is saying the Lord wants to keep the kingdom united, not just Judah, where David and Solomon are and the tribe they belong to, but all of Israel. Yeah. We're still united.
But something has, again, just coming out of, and maybe there's a lot of years between this, but there's just this census done. So people came around and it's like, hey, we're counting everybody. We're all the same thing, even though that was bad. But here, it just seems like it's alluding to there's already a division. Something's already afoot.
Yeah, the Jeremiah who's writing this already knows that this has happened, so.
Okay.
So I think just a note for, again, these hyperlinks that we even see in the New Testament, when we read about Solomon being anointed, and then you read in 39, then they blew the trumpet, and all the people said, long live the king. And then the people follow him out with rejoicing. I mean, when we get in the New Testament, when we're reading about even the return of Jesus, and there was a trumpet, and then his people go to meet him, I mean, that's the context for that, which we've talked about before, but it's good to just see that again. That's the context of, Jesus is king, and his people go to meet him and celebrate when he is anointed king, when he returns as king. So that's like a context hyperlink to remember in the New Testament.
Yeah, some of that is foreign for us because of our democracy and the peaceful exchange of power and all that. Like, no, a king, just having a king is a different way of life than what we know. And
those are blowing the trumpet, people meeting him. Even like when you keep reading, it says, oh, you are going to bring good news, right? Good news is the heralding of a new king. Good news that I'm the king. And he says, no, it's not that. There's another king. I mean, all of that is language that we see in the gospel, but it's Jesus is king. That's the good news.
I love in chapter 1, verse 49. Then all the guests of Adonijah trembled and rose, and each went his own way. And I was like, you're there to celebrate the guy you think is the king, and then you find out I'm at the wrong table.
Yeah.
Like,
I was thinking, like, good for them for just leaving.
Yeah. Like, how do they sneak away to make sure they're not associated with this guy?
That's right, because it's not going to be good. And holding on to the horns of the altar, I just, if you look at the pictures of the altar, there's these horns, where the sacrifices are made in the Ark of the Covenant, and that just gives you sanctuary from retribution. It's about grace from God and the protection of God, and so you see that a couple times.
Yeah.
Okay, then we get these instructions from David to Solomon, which is like pretty encouraging. You think like father, son, like imagining a father saying some of this stuff to his son. It's like, oh man, yeah.
And it's also very similar to what the speech Moses gives, his speech Joshua gives. It's this continuation of the covenant.
Yep.
Be faithful to Yahweh.
Yeah, walking in his ways, keeping his statutes, his commandments, his rules.
Yeah. But also, you should take these people out.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Then it quickly is like, hey, I know I told these people that I wouldn't kill them.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you can't. And so here's what's got to happen, basically.
Yes, you always see it's this faithfulness, this remnant, but there's always these these cracks that you're saying, oh, okay, come on, guys. You don't actually trust Yahweh completely.
Yeah. So then David
But it is
dies.
this new story. It's this similar speech, so we know we're working on a new story now.
Yeah,
The
it's
new leader.
transitioning.
Uh-huh.
So then David dies, and Solomon's like, all right, cool. Well, my dad just basically told me I need to at least take these people out for this to happen. So
Does it?
It sounds like he got himself, I say like a Luca Brasi, hitman here. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada.
What verse are you in?
That's in 25. So King Solomon sent Benaiah. It's the guy who he sends like every time to go kill all these
that's
people.
right.
John Wick.
Yeah, that's right. But that's because he's trying to take his father's concubine, which it's a claim.
Yeah. Well, that was the first one. There's like all these people that end up dying.
But that's why he does. Is because he had Solomon said, as long as you are faithful to me, then I'm not going to harm you, even though you try to claim the kingship. And then that's what he's doing right here. So, because sometimes we read this and we're like, man, like he just asked for it. Like he said, like, I've given you everything. Just let me have this one wife. Why did Solomon kill him? It's because it really is a claim to being king. Yeah.
And he goes to Bathsheba to ask for like, hey, can you make it so that the concubine is
and Bathsheba's like, sure, get rid of this lady.
Right. Yeah. But didn't end well.
Nope.
So anyway, we have those three people died, and then as soon as after it says, so the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. So
the dust settles.
Yeah.
Yep. And then chapter 3 is awesome.
Yeah.
At least it starts that way.
Well, no, it does not start awesome. It's
that's right. Yeah, you're
like,
right. You're right.
It's confusing.
That's what it was. It was like, okay, cool, this is great. His kingdom's here. It's like, crap, that doesn't sound like a good idea.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So he makes a pact with the Pharaoh of Egypt or an alliance. Something.
Marries a foreign wife.
To marry,
not any foreign wife, but Pharaoh's daughter.
Yeah.
Who had enslaved the people. He's like Pharaoh is the epitome of the bad guy in the Old Testament, and that's who he aligns himself with. So you're like, what's going on? And then you read this awesome story that is hyperlinked to Genesis 1, with him asking God for wisdom. So he's relying on God, he's trusting God, he's humbling himself before God. And it even says, where's the verse? But help me to discern between good and evil so that I can rule. I mean, you're like, oh, he's doing what Adam and Eve did not do, which is trusting God to show him the difference between good and evil so he can rule on his behalf.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yay. Yeah. But also he's aligning himself with Pharaoh. So which is it?
So back in Deuteronomy chapter 17, there's a section called in the superscript, Laws Concerning Israel's Kings. Mm-hmm. And it's like, when you come into the land the Lord your God is giving you, you possess it. He said, you're going to want to set a king over you. Make sure it's one who loves the Lord. And then only he must not acquire many horses for himself or cause the people to return to Egypt in any way in order to acquire many horses, since the Lord has said to you, you shall never return that way again.
Yeah, ooh.
And here is Solomon, who...
He should have known that. It says it right there.
It says it right there, yeah. But he's made this alliance with Egypt.
Yeah.
And should not have done that. He shall not acquire many wives for himself, lest his heart turn away. Nor shall he acquire for himself excessive silver and gold.
Yeah, dude, that's everything that's about to happen.
That's exactly right.
Horses from Egypt, excessive gold, foreign wives.
He had like 700 or something.
And again, it's like back to Hannah's song. He's exalting himself, and you see it. But you also see him receiving the wisdom of God. And so you do see these sort of flashes of Eden blessing. That says, since we're just sort of going through all of it, what verse is it? It's a Hamilton quote. Did y'all read that? The quote from the Hamilton musical?
No.
Oh my gosh, I loved it. 425.
Oh, I didn't. We're not in 4 yet.
Yeah, so Judah and Israel lived in safety from Dan even to Beersheba, every man under his vine and under his fig tree.
Oh, yeah.
All the days of Solomon. So vine and fig tree, it's this, this garden blessing.
Yeah.
So his name, Solomon, even means peace. So you do have this, this picture of what it can look like if a king is ruling under the wisdom and authority of God. And the people are blessed, and the foreigners are praising Yahweh, acknowledging his presence. but you also see him doing all of these Pharaoh-type things.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess it is important to set up, like, ultimately at the beginning of 3, what you were referencing is, like, he has this dream where the Lord appears to him and is like, dude, ask for anything and I'll give it to you. And he's basically like, make me wise, like, give me wisdom and discernment.
What a prayer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which you're starting to be like, oh, man, he's that's a good, that's a good ask.
Yeah.
It's not
and it's not just a random good ask. Again, it's Genesis 1. It's him being faithful and surrendering to Yahweh instead of grasping for his own power and wisdom.
Yeah. And then it immediately goes to this story where we get the example of him, like, showing that wisdom, where you have these 2 women who have these babies, one dies, and there's a swap, and then they're like,
napkin story.
Yeah. It's definitely crazy. But, I mean, it's a wise way to figure out that he was able to deduce who was telling them the truth and who wasn't. So.
Yeah, it says, I mean, they perceived that the wisdom of God was in him to do justice. I mean, that's the kind of king you want. The wisdom of God is with him, and he's a just God.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a just king.
And then immediately you start reading him forward. It's like, oh, dude, he's like setting it up right. He's establishing like structure and
sort of,
people.
But you also see that there's slavery, of the Israelites.
Well,
there's forced labor. There's overseers over the slaves. I mean, the only time
what happened in Egypt.
Yeah,
that's what you're like. Wait, he is like this new like human Adam, the David, but he's also acting like Pharaoh too. So which is he? It really goes back and forth the whole time. I mean, the only time, where is it?
I'm thinking like, oh, this guy's smart. He's got stuff to do.
Right.
He's creating structure. He's
forced labor. That phrase, the only other time it's used is in Exodus 1. So you really are supposed to be thinking, wait, forced labor in Israel? Why? We don't do that. That's what God rescued the Israelites from. Why is he forcing labor in Israel?
Yep.
Because we got stuff to do.
Yeah. And then he's also, so there's overseers, which was also in Egypt. He's also has these storehouses for his wealth.
Yeah.
That's what Pharaoh is doing. I mean, there's all of these hyperlinks to Deuteronomy, what kings should not do, and also what Pharaoh was doing.
Yeah,
Yikes.
I'm not going to lie. You're reading all this stuff, and it's like, man, he's got some favor. All this stuff is happening. He's gaining all this. Well, you're like, dude, this is about to end like something bad. Like every next chapter is like, is it going to happen in the next chapter? Is it going to happen in this chapter? Is it going to happen now? Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
And it is both. It's really, I kept thinking when I was reading through this week's, like really, we talk a lot in the New Testament, the already not yet. That's where we are in the church. But really, most of the story in Scripture is already not yet. It's just progressive. And Solomon's a really good picture of that. He is this king who, like David, sought after God's wisdom and trusted God, but at the same time, he ends up grasping for his own authority and wisdom. And so he's doing both at the same time. And so we know what's coming. And it makes you just like, when is there going to be the one who gives us the blessing and the peace without the failure?
Yeah. When I was growing up and learning these Bible stories, I think both my immaturity and lack of ability to see like all the complexity happening here and the way these stories were taught and at the place that I was taught them. It's like these figures like Solomon are lifted up. Look at all the good, but you don't see, or I didn't see at that time, all the cracks and all of the connection to Pharaoh. And like, there is both. There is the good and the bad, like you're saying. But it's worth it, living in that tension a little bit, trying to figure out.
It is. And we'll keep talking about it. But I mean, again, when we say like, where is Jesus in the story? It's big picture. It's the promises. It's the hope of God's covenant being fulfilled, of God's presence being with his people, of a king who rules with justice and humility. Like we're waiting for that. That's where Jesus is, Yeah.
So then we finished this week's reading with, he's building the temple. And so he sent all those laborers. There's a lot of, it sounds like artisans and, building supplies of cedar and gold and
stone and all kind of stuff. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I have a good reference, maybe in one of your picture books, but like, a cubit or what's the dimension that they mentioned?
Roughly 18 inches.
Okay. So, 10. Anyway, there's just a bunch of different references
so like
to that.
30 cubits is 45 feet.
Okay.
60 cubits, 90 feet.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming some of this is all like modeled after some. I mean, do you think he just got this divinely?
Well,
to make, or is it based off of?
I would say it's both, but it has the same structure as the tabernacle.
Yeah,
it's like if you remember when we talked about the tabernacle. The way when you work your way into the most holy place, there are limitations about who can go there and what happens there, and so the temple's designed in the same way.
And it all, again, I mean, just like the tabernacle, the temple has all of this imagery from Eden.
Yep.
So it's the place where the presence of God is with His people.
Yeah. There was just a lot of these poles and the doors and cypress and carvings and palm trees.
It's not as bad as
palm trees. I mean,
or maybe that's later where we get that. I don't remember. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
the palm trees, open flowers,
right? It's garden imagery.
Yep.
The cherubim there. It's where it's the same design as the tabernacle, but it's this permanent structure where they want God's presence to be. With His people.
And God seems to be ordaining it and being like, let's do it. Yeah.
And again, it's not just a throwback to Eden. We have to pull back and see what Eden really was. It was where heaven and earth came together. It's where those two spaces became one place. And that's what the temple is supposed to be, a place where heaven and earth, because sin has fractured that, but in this place, heaven and earth can come back together. God can be among His people.
Yeah.
So you really see in these few chapters, again, Genesis 1. So presence of God, the dwelling place of God with man. He has this king who's ruling with wisdom. The nations are honoring Yahweh. All the people are blessed, but you also are seeing these cracks of Genesis 3 already, because even in 5, you see, nations honoring Yahweh, but then you also see in 5:13, King Solomon drafted forced labor out of Israel. What are you doing? So it's like, again, it's both at the same time. And I think, if you go back and you read the prayer of Solomon whenever he asked for wisdom, the Lord says He grants him wisdom, but it's also an ongoing, again, choice, an ongoing decision to trust in Yahweh's wisdom and Yahweh's discernment. And so He gives him wisdom, but it's something he's going to have to surrender to throughout his reign. And you see him starting that way, but maybe it won't continue.
Yeah. So I guess how do we end this? How do we summarize? I mean, is there some what should we be thinking, or what should we be taking away at this point? Is it just like it's a good thing to pray for that kind of wisdom and have a heart for things of God, not so selfish. And we see this played out, and it seems like it's like we're waiting for something bad to happen. I don't know.
I think that's right. I think we're recognizing the big picture story in this small story. So we're at the climax of the kingdom of God in Israel. But we already see it maybe isn't going to work out perfectly. This might not be the end of the promise, right? This isn't quite there. So that's because we've been reading it consistently. And so you already see sort of the story rehashing again. So I think, it's, again, for us, are we willing to not only seek the wisdom of God and surrender to Him and humble ourselves like David and trust Him like Solomon daily, like throughout our lives, not just this one time, but do we actually want to experience the presence and the blessing of God in our lives? And it is this long road of obedience.
Yeah, for me, like just on a personal level, when I read these stories, especially Solomon, it's like there's a difference between knowing something and living something out.
Yeah.
And that's probably a tension I would say I live with is there's a lot of things I know, but then I find myself doing something different, and I'm like, gosh, I'm broken. I know better. And that's where having a heart like David's and quick to repentance and turn toward the Lord matters. So on the personal level, but then pulling back into the biblical story, like pulling way back to look at it, you do have the promises of God coming true. Even though the people they're coming true through are flawed, you have God's very real presence among the people. You have provision, because, I mean, at one point it was like the people of Israel were happy and well-fed. You have protection, because Solomon even says there's peace all around us. You have all the promises coming true because the Lord is doing that. But there's always a warning with it. It's like, but when you turn away, you will begin to miss out on those things, and that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like you're seeing the covenants from Abraham, the fruition of that, and David possibly, this continuation of his line. But the promise of Genesis 3, that there's going to be the seed, which we've been tracing the seed all throughout this story, that's going to crush the head of the serpent. So really overcome evil.
Yep.
Crush evil itself. We're waiting for that.
Yeah.
You can subscribe to receive additional resources to help you study the story of Scripture at clearcreekresources.org. We'll see you next week.